Hi. I often jokingly say that people are in mid-career longer than they are married often. Of course, it's meant more as a joke, but it also indicates that the mid-career phase that we often ignore is a pretty long phase. Some people are in mid-career for up to 50 years, and if you are running your own show or in some organizational hierarchy, let's say a family business or something, you could be mid-career your entire life. And over the years, I've noticed since I started dabbling into coaching people who were in mid-career, I understood that people associate a certain negative connotation with this, as if it was a curse. It is not a curse, it is a reality of human life that if you have joined a career, you will be an early career professional at some point, and then you will become a mid career professional. And very few of us, because of the pyramid that we are in, will get to the top. It's as simple as that. There is no curse in this. There is nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing to be worried about. And look around you. Almost everybody is in mid-career, right? So with that, let's get into the show. This is episode 96 of your show, Manage Better. My name is Anshuman Tiwari, and I will host the show today, as the previous shows. Uh, Most of the shows that you have seen on this series are about mid-career. What can we do during the mid-career? How can we get better? Some are around quality, of course, which is my professional domain. And off late, we have tried to shift into space where this whole mid-career issue can be dealt with. And no better person in India than my guest today, Nathan SV, who I will, of course, introduce in a minute. But the reason I reached out to him is, of course, he's written a wonderful book about the whole subject. And over the years, he's known as somebody who's willing to help people who are in a difficult spot. Now, this doesn't mean that you start pinging him after this show and flood his inbox. Of course, to be able to help somebody, you need to have some association and some comfort level as well. So, in that sense. Now, quickly, let me introduce, and it's easier for me to introduce a guest such high profile when he's not on the camera. So I will do that now because I will otherwise stutter. So Nathan is a partner with Deloitte, focusing on advisory and enterprise work. He was the former CHRO, which is Chief Human Resource Officer of Deloitte South Asia, where he was also member of the India leadership team and the Global Talent Leadership Council. So a global experience, has over 40 years experience in HR management in Indian and MNCs across industries, manufacturing services, you name it, including IT and professional services, of course, now with Deloitte. Very respected voice in the HR profession. Nathan has been featured on all, media and or anything to do with HR. Almost, and I'll not, rattle through that list. You can, of course, check his profile on LinkedIn. If you like that, you can follow him. If you think that you know him, and he might also remember that you know him, you can send him a connection request. I always do that. And he's been recognized as a distinguished alumnus of XLRI, his alma mater, and also recognized by for the Lifetime Achievement Award by Economic Times in 2021. So Economic Times giving a Lifetime Achievement Award to Nathan, and he's our guest today. He served as the immediate past president of National Human Resources Network, also popularly called as the NHRD network, and which is largest body of HR professionals. A lot of credentials, but the reason why, of course, I wanted him today is that he's happy to help people who want to learn. And very quickly, just to add also, as I said earlier, he's a TEDx speaker. He's also the author of the book, like I mentioned earlier, The Heart of Work, which includes many stories around careers, some principles, some concepts that you can use. So if you are into reading books and like something around careers and work and all, you can check it out later. Very importantly, if you are on social media, particularly LinkedIn, where it's very popular, you can check the hashtag Office Truths, where he shares engaging stories. So now that the introduction is away, let me introduce Namaskar Nathanji. Welcome to the show.
Namaskar. Good to meet you.
And I did, of course, the introduction without you on the screen because I did it on purpose. But now that you are here, any opening comments on the topic or anything just to get us started that you wanted to share with us?
So, Anshuman, first I want to congratulate you. A 96th show means that you've really done a heck of a lot of work. And it's not like production of this is not easy. The fact that you do this about Manage Better talks about your intent of how you can help people lead a more meaningful life. Because most of the time we are at work. If you really look at this 80% of our time, 75% of our time, three-fourths of our lives, we could be in the office. So therefore, how can we manage ourselves better? And I thought that was just very appropriate. The topic is also very, very endearing because, as you very jocularly said, we spend more time being a person with midlife than even people who are our own
Married.
spouse. Yes, absolutely. So that's very nice. Very, very nice of you to talk about this particular subject. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So the format of the talk or conversation. First of all, it is conversational, so we will have a chat, and I always tell people, my audience, that I am getting coached by industry stalwart, and there is an audience. So you think of it as like a private tuition with an audience, and that's how this goes. Uh, I, of course, have some questions for you from your space. And in general, we follow a why, what, how principle through the series. Generally, we don't get to the how, the why and what is sufficient, which I feel is okay because people, the how is always customized. So if they
Yes.
know why and what, they should be, and if they are, smart enough to be on the show, they have found this show, they have understood you, they should be able to figure out the how. And otherwise, even if they have not figured out, they should hire probably a coach or get a little deeper into that space. So
Surely.
with that, let's get into the topic. Now, why is mid-career even seen as an issue? Like I said during the introduction, it's a reality of life.
Yes.
So why is it even an issue in your view and your experience that you've seen, uh, and it often gets a bad name?
I think number one, Anshuman, I think midlife is a given. So midlife career is a given. It becomes an issue because between what a person wants, desires, uh, really believes that this is what a person is capable of, and what they see happening at work, there is a kind of a mismatch. And therefore, over some period of time, if they don't see themselves progressing, they start to devalue themselves. And the opinion that I had about myself as a person suffers a bit of a jhatka. And that's when you start to really worry about. If you look at it very dispassionately, it's very simple. It's a nice pyramid. And a pyramid, we all start at the bottom, we get to the middle, which is fairly thick. But as you try to get to the top, it gets to be a lot more difficult. And therefore, unless you break that particular threshold and you're able to, first of all, you got to ask yourself, is that what you wish to do? Is that what you really want? There are a lot of pressures, Anshuman. There are pressures at home, there are societal pressures, there are peer pressures, there are pressures from friends who are in other industries and they start to, and then you have their friends, and then it starts to work on you. And then you start to think, is anything wrong with me?
Hmm.
Many outstanding professionals, even at the mid career, if they are not able to even break free and get to the next level, they start to see and suffer the anxiety of just being in the current, unable to get past that. This is a serious issue because if you look at our country, our country has more and more people coming into the workforce. And if you look at the millions of people who are currently in the workforce, and several of them are in corporate jobs, and many of them have not prepared themselves for the midlife, then at some stage you're only seeing a problem which is only getting bigger and bigger. So that really is the issue, Anshuma.
Yeah, I think in whatever little experience, what I've also seen more recently that, alongside my job, I've tried to help people and I do it from a position of that I'm in mid-career and I've seen many of these things. Some I've solved, some I've struggled, some I've failed, and that's an experience I can share. So I relate to what you just shared, and you, of course, come from more experience, but we can all see the same experience that people, of course, the root cause is psychologically that we tend to compare with everybody else than ourselves. So we don't play golf, we play something else. So golf is with yourself, or a sport of running, for example, is with yourself, but we try and compare with everybody else and don't look at where we have reached. But we will not get into that psychological piece because that needs conversation. But I completely agree. People who come to me, I often see have this issue. I'm getting some disturbance from your end. Is there something that is rustling at your desk or something? No?
No, not really. Has it
Okay.
stopped?
It is very intermittent. So anyway, we'll continue and otherwise we'll find a way. Okay.
Surely.
Anyway, so we get that, this is an issue for no reason. People, it's a reality of life. It should be embraced. It should be enjoyed. And if you make it to the top, fantastic. If you don't make it to the top, you've had a good life. I am not professing that you should not have any ambition or you should not have aspiration to reach the top, but you should also have the magnanimity and the equanimity that it may not happen. Okay, so in all the reading that I have done, Nathan, and whatever I see amongst people, stagnation, mid-career stagnation is the main issue that people face. Of course, it's a symptom. Stagnation is not the cause. It is a symptom or an effect that we see. Firstly, do you see that? And in your experience, what are what are the symptoms other than mid-career stagnation that we can see?
If you really look at what's happening with people who enter this midlife, and let's say what is midlife? Any time when a person touches around um, about anywhere between 17 to 25 years of work experience, that's about the time when you're really looking at stagnation. Today, the reality is, given that the urges of people, the ambitions of people, that that particular range has actually shifted. People start to think at mid career as anything around maybe even 10 to 12 years onwards. I see this as a big reality because when people hit that, they start to put expectations of themselves. And even in the conversations that we have with their own superiors is, when is it that I will get to the next level? And what is it that I have to do to get to the next level? Absolutely fine questions. But the reality is, when they are told, when there is a feedback which is given, our ability to take that feedback, do something with it, and then accept the reality, either I'm going to break this particular threshold or I'm going to remain within. And if I'm going to remain within, and it's going to be for an extended period of time, how do I really manage this? I think therein lies the big question. How do I manage the current issues that I have with not progressing? Part of this is systemic. The government of India has done it in a beautiful way, and I think there are good systems. If you look at many of the PSUs, it's very clearly well laid. So you will progress this particular level, it will take so much long. If you look at the army, and there are tests that happen, And in those, if you're able to get over that particular threshold, then you make it. And they prepare their people really, really well. So if you look at the systems and processes that you have, either in the forces or what you find in the government, it's a very well laid plan. Everybody knows. And the reality is, people get to know whether they're going to move or not. Acceptance of such is a lot more easier. Currently, we are faced in a world where people want to get promoted every almost, forget even a year. People are saying, can I get promoted in 6 months? In some places, for instance, if you look at the whole field of IT is, the pressure is even more significant. So people suffer because they start to draw all kinds of expectations of themselves, because what they see is what they hear about around the world, and they suffer. So part of that is about stagnation. Yes, our ability to look at the mirror and say, who am I and what am I capable of? At another level, and I'm not talking about things which is beyond stagnation, is if we have to get to a career of 40 years, and if job is the one that's entirely going to be defining me and that's going to be my identity, somewhere we are missing the wood for the trees, Anshuman. If, for instance, there is a person who's a singer, and I feel that I'm very good as a singer and that's my avocation and I enjoy doing that. I may not be the best of singers, but at least it starts to build a certain, outside of my work, I've got something else to do. People have friends, people have, and I would say there are others. Let me give you an example, a physics example of what really happens during an eclipse. In an eclipse, you see the one which is in the center completely blacked out. That is the umbra. And around that, there is something called the penumbra. The eclipse itself, which is captured, looks beautiful, not because of the umbra, which is absolutely black, but because of the penumbra, which is that white stuff which is around us. What is it that I can do which can be beyond work? Some people like writing. Some people engage themselves getting into uh, a circle of friends. Some people have sports. Some So our own ability to develop some of our hobbies along the way, because that which is our job is good, but the one which is about the penumbra is the one that can satisfy me. So instead of work, which is all about my life, can I have work which is in the flow of life and not the life in its entirety? And the moment I get to terms with that, then there is a better way of managing myself and my anxieties around stagnation.
I think this is beautifully explained. I certainly love the part around, that of course, this is real, and bringing it to the, the flow part. And flow is a concept, of course, where there is psychologically, if you study this, it say that when your capabilities meet the task at hand, you are in a state of flow. If your
Absolutely.
capabilities are much more than the task at hand, you'd get bored. If your
Bored,
capability is much smaller than the task at hand, you will be overwhelmed. And
overwhelmed.
so as HR people or people who I manage large teams, so my job is usually to find that match, that can I match capability to the task at hand? Because once that happens, I don't have to supervise the person supervises himself or herself. And of course, this concept is not ours. It is Mihail Csikszentmihalyi, his concept. But let's get moving. And I will come to the hobby part a little later, Nathan, because that was something that I wanted to bring in also as a remedy. Because, for example, and now that we've discussed briefly, people ask me, why do you do this kind of shows, Anshuman? So I said it brings me great joy, because I have a network of people who have achieved something in life. I also have people in my network who are wanting to achieve something in life. I think I have that responsibility to bridge the two. So that's how I think of it. So one reminder to my audience, I can see quite a few comments coming in. And Murthy, thank you very much, as always, always joining. And quite a few, Batin, thanks a lot. So the reminder, of course, to the audience is that Nathan will take your questions, and you can start posting your questions now, so that we can pick the ones that make the most sense for today's conversation. Okay, so we've come to a stage where we've looked at the core symptom, which is stagnation, what is around it, that also a little bit. What could be the causes for these kind of symptoms, starting with stagnation and the whole space? Why do people, why is most important? Because why do people feel stagnated in their mid-career? I know you touched a little bit, but could you get a little deeper into why this happens?
You said that very well, Anshuman, early on, where your capabilities meet the kind of work that you're good at, then you will be in the zone. Many of us misjudge our own capabilities. And sometimes we think that we can do much more than what comes to us. Second is, part of what I had mentioned earlier is about a little bit about feedback. When somebody tells you something, and these days, it's very rare to find a boss who's a Dutch who will be able to tell you to your face that this is what is right with you, it's wrong with you. It's very rare. So we do not read the signals right. So when we don't read the signals right, we can go astray. And also, we start to think if this is not it, then I think the panacea is looking for yet another job. And for all you know, you could move from the frying pan into the fire. I think most of what we are trying to do in today's day and age is to satisfy at one level ego, and at another level, we fail to respond to this question, the core question, who am I? I think therein lies the biggest of our problems. The other question is, we don't ask the right questions also, Anshuman. And I'll give you an example. Many times,
Sure.
if you go around and ask people, what are my strengths? What am I good at? For all you know, I could get into the zone of what can be done by me. I will take you back many, many years ago. I wanted to be an athlete, Anshuman. Why? Because my father was an athlete and he represented, etc., etc. And I said, I must be an athlete. And I got very, so I went to my mother and I said, Amma, I just need to do something. I need to be an athlete the way dad is. I said, okay, go to the playground. In those days, you had those nice 400-meter tracks. And I went in and I saw a coach. These guys are all self-appointed. Nobody pays them anything. I went over there and like all of us very reverentially, I touched his feet and I said, Coach, I would like to be a sprinter. And he looked at me and he says, you want to be a sprinter? I said, yes, I want to be a sprinter. I said, okay, on your mark, get set, go, 100 meters. So I charged off like a rabbit. I thought I did a great job. I came back to the coach and he looked at me and he says, I can't coach you, son, because I don't think you even meet the minimum thresholds of what it means to be a sprinter. I was crestfallen. I thought the whole world ended. And then I came back home and I went to my mother and there were tears in my eyes. And I said, Amma, I don't think I can be an athlete. I said, what happened? Then I recounted the whole thing. She says, you asked the wrong question. So I said, what should be my question? She said, you asked the coach, sir, what am I good at? So next day I went again. He looked at me and said, I just thought I told you yesterday, you're not a good sprinter. So I went up again, touched his feet, and I said, sir, what could I be good at? And he says, okay. He saw that I was not willing to give up. Said, okay, 400-meter track, start running. So I started to run. First round, second, third, fourth. I have no idea how many rounds I did that day. he called me, he stopped, called me, and he says, "Son, you will make a good middle and long distance runner. So I'll sign you up." I don't know what happened in that moment. There were tears in my eyes because at one level I thought that I can now be as good as my father. Oh, fast forward, I was the college captain in athletics, etc. But that particular moment of coaching in my life, I've never forgotten. Because instead of asking this question, that this is what I need to do, if you say, what am I good at? Then I got some answers. And that is a moment which to me opened a lot of doors. I often visit that particular incident because it also tells me what I ought to be doing in my own life. Seek feedback. Seek feedback. And people will tell you to your face that this is what you're good at. Hmm. Midlife crises happen because we don't ask the right questions. So, can I ask the right questions? Can I say, what am I good at? What do you think I should be doing? And you should be prepared to listen to the responses that come your way. They show the mirror because it's not in the coach to get you to be a great athlete because he
Hmm.
is all but a person who is able to show you the mirror. It's for you to say, this is what I'm receiving as a feedback and how do I move forward.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. As you were talking, Nathan, I realized that sometimes the same question is also that what do we want to do? So what is that Venn diagram of circle of what do you want and what can? So
That's
your
right.
ambition and capability should have some intersection. We are of course not saying
Absolutely.
that and this is where sometimes that man can do anything and everything can be challenged a little bit because we can do anything and everything, but yes, but most of in life and career it is about what is the circle of your ambition or what do you want to do and what can you do. If there is no intersection, you are going to pursue two different lines throughout your life, and
Yes.
it's going to be very difficult. So okay, um, we are getting some questions. So would you like to take some questions now
Surely,
or
surely, surely. I can take it right away.
cool? So I will pick Women's Day coming up. So Yashri, I'll present the question on the screen also, but the question is
I have
for
seen it. Yes.
more
So,
about women.
so Jayashree, thank you for this question. Mid-career women at mid-career. This is a lethal combination. Um, I I think the question is really agnostic to gender. What really is a good way of handling this particular combination? But it gets to be a little more difficult because if you're working in an environment which is where the ecosystem is not really geared to accept that there could be women who could take on senior roles, it is an issue. It's a real issue, and that's when you need to ask these searching questions. Am I in the right place? By the way, I'm not really suggesting that you should start to job hopping, but then I think the question there is start to look at what are the gaps that you have between an aspiration and your current capability, and see if that can be filled in. Have a mentor in your life. I think is very important because they have no axe to grind, but they will tell you to your face in a nice, gentle way, and you could work on that. The third thing, and this is really an assessment that people have to make for themselves, if this is going to be the reality and there is nothing I can do about it, can I look at this whole thing and say, am I comfortable with it? And is there anything that I can do that can make my life a lot more fulfilling? And there are several things that you can do, Jayashree. You ask yourself what you're good at things even beyond work. And that's when you start to realize that there are other facets of your life that you have not explored in full. It's a full life. And I go back to the statement that I make, it is work in the flow of life. It's not everything. So if you start to look at the values that you have, and that's a great way to start. Back with you, Anshuman.
Thanks a lot. I think so. Jayashree, I hope you have your answer. Thank you for your question. We have Asif from Pakistan. Thank you, Asif, for joining. And let's look at your question. So Asif is asking about what do you say that many capable people fall too much in love with the company they work for and don't change a job when this ceiling of professional development has reached. Poor regular self-assessment you know and not taking any risk at all. So
So,
uh,
Asif, I tell you, I've been in this zone some time back. I'll tell you what I did. Um, I was not very happy with my job, not because it was not a great company, it was a great company. Unfortunately, I'd taken on a job that I was not comfortable with. And then I made a decision in my life, and I'm sharing this for the first time on this particular. I decided that I would move. And when I moved, I kid you not, for 69 days, I had no job. I was not on the bench. I mean, there was no salary, there was nothing. 69 days. I remember because on the 70th day, I went to work. But the 30 days that it took to reflect what is it that I want, what kind of a role that I would want. Many of us, for instance, Asibai, you know, I have been in manufacturing for a certain period of time. I was in manufacturing for 12 years. Then I went into services. I have been in IT. Then I've been in software. I was with product. I've been through many, and then I went into professional services. I fell in love with my first company. I really loved it. The one that I'm working today is an awesome company. I would never leave it until I retire, of course. Um, but be very careful, Asif. At any point in time, even in any company that you're in, you could face a midlife, and it's got nothing to do with your age, it's got nothing to do with the span. Even if you're in a senior management, you could still be what I call as mid-career, because all of us have aspirations. The trick is, um, we look at more education because we think that that can make us better. We look at experience and we say that can make us even better. Both these will be brushed aside. What people need is exposure, which means doing something completely different. And if there is a way of negotiating with your current company that you would want something entirely different, I think that's a good place to start. And sometimes companies cannot manage that. Many capable people have choices. So that's the question that you got to ask yourself. I don't know whether I've responded to your question completely, but that's the honest answer.
I'm sure you have, and thank you, Nathan, for sharing your personal story about not having a role or job for 69 days. Must It will certainly give courage and hope and respectability to several people who start worrying too much about this. I will share that I've been in the same position, although officially I got a job little while I was on bench technically, but there was no salary, nothing for some time.
Exactly.
And this is life. If you want to make that jump, uh, and some people come to me during my coaching sessions and say that you suggested I take the risk. I took the risk. It did not work out. So I'm like, first of all, I did not ask you to take the risk. It was your choice. So secondly, the word risk itself includes that it may not work out. So
Exactly.
there is no assurance that it will work out. You are taking the risk, an educated risk, and with the awareness of the consequences. And just as you expect the good part to turn out on your side, it may not happen, and you may have the rough end of the stick. But that's the life you chose. Otherwise, and the other analogy, nothing I give sometimes is that in not so much now, but in the olden war situations, manual hand-to-hand combat, you could save yourself from near death by hiding in a bunker. You stay in a bunker, which is the equivalent of staying under the radar in a job. You don't come out, nothing will happen. You will survive the war. But if you come out, there could be that one bullet that has your name on it, and
That's right.
it could hit you. But that's how it is. Okay, now that we are in the question mode, let me take one more question. This is a slightly longer question, nothing, but let me take it. It's from one of our regulars. Murthy is asking about several folks are feeling insecure about their roles, jobs, and are getting onto learning roller coaster without much thought of how it ties to their current or future roles. Some of them are also taking on more than they can chew in the, of course. Again, this context as a very senior professional, what according to you are the meta skills? Fantastic questions. Meta skills professionals need to inculcate to succeed in the future. I will amplify the question a little bit, Nathan. More recently, a lot of people ask me about, sir, should I do a data science course, business, this? And I keep saying that, what makes you believe that doing a course will make you a data scientist? If you don't have the core ingredient and a curious mind and a bent for asking questions and analyzing, a course will not make you one. So, but anyway, any points on Murthy's question?
First of all, Mr. Murthy, I think you've asked a very, very pertinent question, something which is very, very real. This is what is happening in today's age. Technology is changing every 6 months. It is impossible for anybody to become an expert overnight. So if you ask me, what is the one meta skill that one requires? That meta skill is adaptive skills. If you can adapt yourself, then that is the superordinate skill because that will really get you ahead. I I think all of us start to fear if somebody if you're in IT, let's say once upon a time Java was supposed to be the latest and greatest at one point in time. Java today has given ways to a lot of other skills that people want. Suddenly somebody came up and said cloud, and they want people who have experience of more than 5 years on cloud. The cloud is only a nascent skill that has come up. Then a couple of years ago, people said, I want people with 5 years of skill. I said, it does not really exist. So the only way that you can really get ahead is get people who have the Java skills and say, okay, this is an adjacent skill. So is there anything, do you have people who are on your team who are willing to take this on and say, okay, I'm going to work on my skills and I'm trying to learn something about the cloud. What you're going to do with what is not as important as a certain belief that you can adapt. If you can look at yourself and say, yes, I'm going to do this, and even if it means that you're getting into the coldest part, well, that's a great way to start. It's a lot about a mind game. And if you will humor me a minute, in peak winter, I was in Allahabad, and something told me that I must go to Sangam. And I live in a place. And first of all, I feel very cold even when the temperature is around 24. And so I start to get my jacket on and all that. I went to Sangam, and suddenly I felt I should take a dip. It was 6 degrees, and I'm sure the water was even more colder. But once you make up your mind and then you say, okay, I'm going to shed my clothes, the water was freezing, but it froze only for that one, maybe some 5 seconds or so. And I managed to take a dip in the Sangam, and I came out. The water was very cold. But when I came out, I did not need an overcoat. There was nothing called even a pullover, nothing. All I did was wear a shirt, and I was very comfortable. Much after I realized it's a little bit about the courage that is required. You ask me what is a meta skill? Adaptive. But as good as the meta skill of being adaptive is the one about courage. The last one is conviction. If you have the courage, you have the conviction, and you believe that you can, and you look at this other side of you, which is adaptive, I think we have a winner on our hands. Back to you. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Murthy, thank you very much. I think if you had not asked this question, we would not have known of this brilliant anecdote. And I know exactly the feeling, nothing, because I've been to the place that you're mentioning. I'm from that part of the world, so it's a little bit more easier for me.
Very cool.
But, but in December, January, it can be very cold, and as always, the water is colder than the ground level as well. So, but and amazing how you connected the two from a career and courage point of view. Thank you very much for that. So moving on, and I'm very aware that we have only a few more minutes to go. So if anyone has a question and is waiting for that last 1 minute to ask that, please don't do so. We will end the show well before 1 hour, uh, as the last few shows we have been doing. So now coming to, we've looked at the, symptom, we've looked at some causes, we've looked at the whole perspective. Obviously, there can be some remedy. Now, during the last half an hour or so, you mentioned some remedies, but can you try and bring out some remedies for us, that what can people who are listening to you today and will listen to the recording later on can do in the next 100 days, 1 year, 2 years to get out of this stagnation?
Um, I think it starts with asking yourself this bigger question: what is your goal in life? Now, these are very big questions, Anshuman. Very, very big questions, because sometimes you don't even know whether you what do you want. You may not even know the answer, because the moment you say I want to become a vice president is a vice president in one particular organization. In another organization, in the second year of your appointment, you are called a vice president. And you know of certain multinational banks which are very famous for these kinds of designations. So you really have to ask yourself, what do you really wish to do? What are the goals that you have? Second one is, you start to make a good assessment of yourself. What are you good at? And really ask yourself, what are your interests in the kind of work that you've been doing? I know of a certain person who was in administration, and this person had hit his glass ceiling, and he could never be more than an administration manager. And he came up and he said, I need to do something, and I want to become something more than an administration manager. And I kid you not, this person has one of the best communication skills. And I said, okay, can you spend a few minutes more asking yourself, what are you willing to do a bit more than saying, this is what I want? He said, what do I need to do? We had a good conversation. Part of this was education. And today, Anshuman, he is a vice president of learning and development in a very, very large organization. And what did he do? He just asked this question and said, what do I have to do? And then, apropos to his skills, he went ahead and made an attempt. So I think that's the other one that you have to do. The one that we seldom do, Anshuman, is we don't ask for help. We feel that it is below our let me say, our dignity to seek help. We don't do that. Many of us fail to realize that networking is important. If you get to a mid stage, I would say even early career people are better networkers today. I think it's easy to network because you can always ask and you can reach out for help. I'm not saying that somebody has to go out and say, I need a job in your company, but people will be able to help you and say, hey, listen, I know of something, etc. So networking is very important. I've always believed that your net worth is a function of your network. So start to network. I spoke very briefly about professional development as such. So whether this is to do with education. Today, we never had these kinds of options that we had in the past, Anshuman. But today, there are many universities which allow for an executive MBA, for instance, or specialization in whichever branch that you want. I want a specialization in logistics. Today, you have all the leading IIMs, you look at the XLRIs of the world, you look at all these big places, they would have programs. A part of you is how do you do a little bit of your cleaning and then start to burnish it and then get yourself either a certification or undergo a full-fledged program. It's very, very enlivening. I think that's a very important thing for us to do. I would also urge few of us to be to come to terms with ourselves that this is what I'm capable of, and if there is nothing beyond this, can I also be a little flexible? Because people with your kind of capabilities may not grow in your particular organization, but there are organizations which need people with your capabilities, perhaps your skills, and maybe they're not as large, maybe they don't have this, maybe they don't have that, but at least you would be able to say, okay, this is what I can do going forward. I can tell you this, that there are some skills which over time will perish. But even there, you have people who are very keen on going forward. That requires, amongst other things, can I be a little flexible with the view that I have? Can I make some adjustments? I think if you do a lot of these 6 or 7 things that I have mentioned, and of course the one in the past, which is a lot about asking. The big thing is going and asking for help. I think that's a great place to start.
It's interesting. I think one thing, nothing throughout the show I'm noticing is that seeking feedback, asking for help is something that you is almost like your with card, So that's what you tell people, and that's a great lesson for us also in terms of you lived it yourself, and now you are willing to share. And of course, people who are listening now and who will listen later should be able to learn. Here is a man who has seen everything in the chosen space, and is openly saying that one of the key skills is to seek feedback, stay open to learning, and other things as well. But the thing that is stuck in my mind is this seek feedback all the time. So after the show, definitely I am going to ask you, what did I do well, and what could I have done better? But that's after the show.
So
So
Anshu, I'll tell you this. At the time when I almost when I lost my job and I moved out of that particular job, those days I had a diary where I
hmm,
started to write, this is what I'm good at. And then I met a number of my friends, a lot of people. And then
yeah,
I started to seek feedback. When you start to look at who you are and what the world thinks of you, and if there is a Venn diagram and look at what are the common elements, I think you're coming to grips or coming to terms with yourself as a professional. Those things are important. And then you take a big leap of faith. The last one that I will mention is be careful about the next move that you make. It could be risky, but that's the best thing you would have done because the very act of taking an action is the one that can be very enlivening. Because if you stay where you are and complain about the current, it never helps the future. So back to you, Anshuman. Thank you.
I mean, moaning and groaning never got anyone anywhere. you can you might get noticed and shown the door as well. So with that, we I would like to start wrapping up the talk, Nathan. So one question I usually ask all my guests is about anything, and since I can see some books behind you, one question is around anything about, particularly keeping the topic of today's conversation in mind, any one or two books that you would recommend to our audience, which
Um, People are wired differently, Anshuman. Not everybody is as voracious a reader as you are. Some people read, but I think read every chapter of the book of your own life. That is important because it tells you about your past, it tells you about what you have moved through, and there are a whole host of pages that you have to fill in. Start to fill in because then revised about who you are in the past and the future that you hold, start to write about that as well. Because this book of life that you will write, even reminisce, is the one that's going to be the most important one. By the way, I have a lot of favorite books. I would fail in my duty if I didn't ask you to read this book called The Heart of Work, which is a book that I've written. I'm not saying that you should read it because I have written that book, but I just think that stories enliven. You have your own story. Start to visit your own story because your life is a function of who you are and who you wish to become. So there are a whole host of self-management books. So I don't really say I would recommend one over the other. But what got you here will not get you there is a book that I'm very, very fond of by Marshall Goldsmith. I really
Yes,
like that.
it is one of my top 10 as well in almost all the lists that I come up with. Uh, you may not know, and maybe some in audience don't know that for over 2 years, more than 2 years now, and I've taken a small break now, but I've been publishing a small book summary every Monday on LinkedIn. And that's actually got some fan following of its own because the same people like to return. And recently, I converted that into a small booklet, which not all, but 15 selected ones that I can share with anybody who's interested. So, thank you very much, Nathan. I have one question from the audience, which I wish I had. So, I will bring it up. It is for you. Guna Bharti ji is asking, what aspects of your work are you most proud of, and what legacy do you want to leave? So, fantastic question. First of all, Guna Bharti, question of the day, and over to you, Nathan.
What I'm very, very proud of is not about my work, really, Guna. I'm very proud of the work that members of my team do. And when they rise and shine, I kind of bask in their glory. Um, the second one is, what legacy do you want to leave? I don't know whether I've reached any place where I say I want to leave a legacy, but I do think that if each person is able to reach their own potentiality, and if I've done anything that could help them along that journey, I would have felt that that's a life well lived. So if I would have helped somebody reach their potentiality, some way find ways to stop that, that's a life well lived, a journey well traveled. Thank you.
Spoken like a true giver, Nathan sir. So, this is difference between people who want to give always, and you've shown brightly on that. And we know already, and I'm from the same industry, or at least in the industry, and I know a lot of people who now claim claim as in their training was under you, so they feel proud that we worked with nothing, and today we are worth something. So you've done really well on that front as well, and one day I would like to meet and seek your blessings as well.
My.
uh, But it is time to now close the conversation. Thank you very much, sir. And what we small tradition, of course, is that whenever I can, I usually announce the next guest. So the next speaker is somebody you might know, Nathan, is Chris Shankar, or earlier of Infosys and Airtel, is on 16th of March, which is a Saturday at 11 a.m. The usual time. Today was slightly different time, the usual time. So people who want to continue this kind of a conversation or understand from different people in the same space, we will bring Krish Shankar on 16th March at 11 a.m. With that, I will let you go. Thank you once again. And to my lovely audience, fantastic. Thank you. Looking forward to joining you again on 16th. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Krish Shankar is a great guy. His book called Catalyze is a book that you must certainly read. Thank you.
That prompted me, and we look forward to that. And thank you once again. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Cheers.